It's not the loud ones you remember. It's the ones who sit still and make the world shift around them. Let us know in the comments section below if you've ever met someone who seemed invisible until they weren't. Ella Mae Thompson didn't believe in charity, not in the way the church ladies did, not with their clipped smiles and checkbook kindness. Hers came hot off a griddle, with a side of scrambled eggs and 2 slices of buttered toast, served to someone who didn't have to ask. That's why the boy had never paid. He came every morning, just past 6, slipping in quietly like the fog off the Cumberland. Sat alone in the corner booth, the one facing the window, as if he needed to see what might come for him. Never made eye contact. Never gave a name. Just nodded once in thanks before wrapping his long fingers around the warm plate she set down and eating with a careful, grateful pace. Ella called him Kid in her head, not out of disrespect, but because it fit. He was rail-thin, skin too pale, like he'd grown up in shadows. His eyes were a strange, unplaceable gray, and his clothes, always the same faded hoodie and jeans, seemed too clean for someone without a home. That detail stuck with her. Clean. Scrubbed, almost. She never asked him questions. She never asked anyone questions. Ella had long ago learned that the world didn't always want to be understood. Sometimes it just wanted to be held together with one more cup of coffee, one more full plate. And so she gave. "Order up," Gus's gravel voice cut through the kitchen air. He'd been her line cook for 14 years. A Vietnam vet with a limp and a heart bigger than the deep fryer. He'd never asked about the boy, either. Just slid the usual plate toward the window with a nod. Ella took it with practiced ease, her steps automatic now, sliding the plate down to the corner booth. "Morning, hon," she said, like she always did. The boy gave his usual nod. She turned away before he could look up. That was the rhythm. He didn't look at her, and she didn't ask him why. The diner, Ella's place, wasn't much to look at. Just a squat brick building outside Knoxville with chipped booths and coffee-stained counters. But it was clean and warm, and the regulars knew it was one of the last places where cash didn't matter if you needed a meal. But that morning, a Thursday, something was different. Not outside, not yet. Inside, she caught the boy looking. It was just a flicker, eyes lifting, just for a breath. But in that half-second, Ella felt something she couldn't name press against her chest. Like walking into a room and knowing someone had been crying there just a moment before. He looked away fast, back down at his plate, but something had changed. Gus noticed, too. He leaned toward her as she passed the counter. "You see that?" he muttered. She didn't answer, just kept pouring coffee, refilling mugs, her heart ticking a little too fast. That was the morning Sheriff Dawes came in. Not unusual. He had been eating there for 20 years, always ordered the same. Bacon extra crispy, eggs over medium, toast, dry. But today he didn't smile. He didn't even take his hat off. Ella poured his coffee. "Everything okay, Jack?" she asked. Quiet. Dawes didn't look at her. His eyes were scanning the room, slow and deliberate. "You know that kid?" he asked under his breath. Ella didn't turn, just kept her eyes on the pot in her hand. "Pete eats," she said simply. Dawes nodded. "He ever talk?" "No." "You ever see him come or go?" She looked at him then. "What's this about?" The sheriff hesitated, then pulled something from his coat pocket. A folded photo, old and worn. He laid it on the counter between them. It was the boy. A little younger, different haircut, same eyes. Beneath the photo was a single word typed in block letters. "Missing." "Ada," Ella felt her breath catch. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. "You call me if he shows tomorrow," Dawes said quietly. "Don't talk to him. Don't try anything. Just call." She nodded stiffly. The sheriff left without touching his food. Ella stood behind the counter for a long time after he left, coffee still sloshing gently in the pot in her hand. She didn't tell Gus. He didn't tell the boy. But the next morning she made him a bigger breakfast, added extra bacon, slipped a folded napkin beneath his plate. He saw it, took it without a word. She didn't know what was written on it. She hadn't written anything. But he tucked it in his hoodie and looked at her again, just for a moment. But long enough that she almost asked his name. She didn't. He left the diner like he always did, silent, careful, quick. And then, the next morning, everything changed. But not yet. For now, Ella washed dishes in the back, hands deep in soap and silence, while the boy disappeared again into whatever world he'd come from. And outside, in the distance, someone was watching the diner from across the highway, black SUV, windows too dark to see through. But Ella wouldn't know that. Not until the morning they all came at once. And by then it would be too late to wonder who the boy was. It would be time to decide who she was. Ella didn't sleep that night. Not because she was afraid, not exactly. More like her mind refused to rest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that boy's face again. Not the calm, quiet mask he always wore, but the momentary flicker of something raw beneath it, something that looked a lot like fear, or grief, or both. She sat at her tiny kitchen table, the one with mismatched chairs and a crack running down the middle. Her hands cupped a mug that had long gone cold. Outside, the Tennessee night wrapped the town in silence. But Ella felt watched, not just by memory, by presence. By morning, she was at the diner an hour early. She always opened at 5. But that day she turned the key at 4, lights buzzing awake, griddle sizzling to life like muscle memory. Her body knew what to do. Eggs cracked, coffee brewed, bacon hissed and popped. But her mind was somewhere else. That picture, the boy, the sheriff's voice. Call me if he shows. And yet she hadn't called. Even when he walked in again, exactly at 6:03, same hoodie, same careful shuffle toward his booth, Ella said nothing. She brought him a plate like always, this time with a small biscuit wrapped in wax paper slipped under a napkin, a habit she'd picked up for the cold days, when she wasn't sure he'd had dinner the night before. "Morning, hun," she said gently. He looked at her, slower this time. And this time he spoke. "Thank you." The words, simple, but they hit her like a wave. The boy's voice wasn't what she expected. Not shy, not broken. It was quiet, yes, but with weight. Like each syllable had to pass through layers of something before it reached the surface. "You're welcome," she said, softer than she meant to. He didn't say anything more. She didn't need him to. It wasn't until 10 minutes later that she saw the SUV. Not just one now, 3. Black, idling across the highway. Parked beneath the old billboard for a bail bondsman no one used anymore. Windows tinted, engines running. She swallowed hard, grabbed a rag, wiped the counter without looking like she was watching. Gus hadn't come in yet. He usually rolled in around 6:30, unless his knees were flaring up. Today, she hoped they were. Only 2 other customers in the diner. Big Mike, a trucker who always ordered 4 eggs and hash browns drowned in hot sauce, and Jeannie, a nurse coming off night shift, slouched in the corner with her feet up on a chair. Ella walked to the jukebox and hit a random track. Patsy Cline hummed through the speakers. It made the air feel too fragile. She went to the boy's booth. "Do you need anything else?" she asked, pretending to top off his coffee, though his mug was still full. He shook his head, then paused. "There's people looking for me," he said suddenly, quietly. She didn't answer right away. Then, without blinking, she asked, "Are they the right kind of people?" He looked up. Really looked. And in his gray eyes, for the first time she saw it. Terror. Not the kind that came from guilt. the kind that came from being hunted. "No," he said. Ella nodded, almost like she'd expected that. "You in some kind of trouble?" His jaw tensed. "Not mine. I just got stuck in it." She wanted to ask more, Lord, she did, but she saw the way his hand shook when he picked up his fork, the way his shoulders folded inward like he was trying to disappear. So instead, she just said, "You finish your breakfast, then we'll talk." He didn't argue. At 6:42, the front door jingled. Ella turned fast, heart pounding, but it was Gus, still limping, same hat, same apron slung over one shoulder. He clocked the mood in a second. "What's going on?" he muttered, stepping behind the counter. "3 unmarked SUVs across the highway," Ella whispered. "Kid says they're here for him." Gus blinked once, then nodded. No questions. Just like the war. Assess, accept, act. "You want me to call Jack?" he asked. She hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't trust who Jack's working with on this one," she said. Gus grunted. "Thought so." They moved fast, silent code between them. Ella flipped the sign to closed for cleaning. Gus locked the front doors and dropped the back blinds. Jeannie raised an eyebrow, but Ella waved her over with a smile and a slice of lemon pie. Jeannie, bless her soul, just shrugged and said, "Guess I'm on a coffee break." Big Mike was slower on the uptake. "Hey, I still got half a plate here," he grunted. Gus handed him a to-go box. "Time to finish it on the road, big guy." Mike grumbled but complied, pulling a crumpled bill from his pocket and tossing it on the counter. "Don't know what y'all are up to," he muttered, "but I've been in enough truck-stop brawls to smell a storm brewing." He was gone in 60 seconds. Now it was just them. Ella walked back to the boy's booth. He hadn't moved. "They're waiting for you to walk out of here," she said. Then we're not going out the front?" He looked up, startled. "Why are you helping me?" She paused, hand tightening on the edge of the booth. "Because once I was 19 and bleeding out in Kandahar and someone helped me. No questions. Just wrapped my leg and kept me breathing. This," she nodded toward him, "ain't any different." For a long time, the boy didn't say anything. Then, quietly, "I'm not who they think I am." "I believe you." From the back room, Gus called, "Tunnel still clear?" Ella nodded, more to herself than anyone. "Come on," she said, "time to disappear." And just like that, the boy stood. He followed her past the kitchen, past the storage room, into a small door behind the freezer that most folks thought led to a pantry. But Ella had been preparing for a long time. The latch opened with a soft click, revealing a narrow staircase descending into dark. She turned to him, her voice low. "You go down there, Gus'll meet you on the other side. Wait for my signal. And you? I'll keep 'em busy." "I run this place," she said, gently but firm. "They'll come for me first. That buys you time." He stared at her, something breaking behind his eyes. Then he said it. The thing she never thought he'd say. "My name's Caleb." She smiled. "Nice to meet you, Caleb." And then she closed the door behind him, turned back toward the front of the diner, and started walking, steady, certain, like the woman she'd always been. Because trouble had come to her doorstep. And Ella Mae Thompson was done serving it coffee. Ella didn't bother to clean the plate Caleb left behind. She let it sit in the booth, steam still rising off the untouched eggs, like a ghost waiting to be acknowledged. She stepped behind the counter with a practiced calm that masked the way her heart thudded in her chest. Years of field triage had taught her how to compartmentalize fear, a skill that served her better than anything she ever learned back in school. The first SUV moved at 6:58. It pulled off the gravel shoulder and crept across the 2-lane highway like a wolf stepping into a clearing. The other two followed, silent and smooth. They didn't barrel in like cops on a warrant. They slithered, calculated, rehearsed, too quiet. That's what told her everything she needed to know. Ella wiped her hands on a rag, tossed it in the sink, and clicked the lock on the front door before stepping out onto the porch. Her boots thudded heavy on the wooden slats as the 3 SUVs idled just feet away. The first one stopped dead center, driver's door cracked open, and man stepped out. Slick suit, silver tie, haircut too clean for a back road. He was the kind of man who didn't speak until the silence had weight. He stood there, arms loose at his sides, looking at her diner like it was something beneath him, like it should have been bulldozed 10 years ago. "Miss Thompson," he said, voice smooth as glass. "We'd like a word." Ella didn't move. She didn't nod, didn't confirm anything. "Place is closed," she said, voice flat. "Health inspector flagged a grease trap. Try next week." The man smiled like he'd just heard a child tell a lie. "We believe a person of interest passed through here this morning." "Lots of people pass through. It's a diner. You serve breakfast to a miner wearing a gray hoodie comes in at 6 most mornings." She kept her expression still. "You just described half the county." The second SUV door opened. Another man stepped out, leaner, less polished, black gloves on despite the May heat. He didn't speak, just stood behind the first, eyes scanning the windows. Ella didn't like that. Her hand inched toward the chalkboard by the front door. It looked decorative, but the wood behind it was hollowed. The sawed-off she kept for worst-case scenarios was tucked just inside. She didn't grab it. "Yeah, I think you'd better leave," she said. The suited man stepped onto the first stair of the porch. "That was bold." "We're with a federal agency," he said, reaching into his coat. She tensed. But instead of a weapon, he pulled a badge. Black, no seal. Just initials she didn't recognize. "Never heard of that agency," she said. "You're not supposed to. And I'm not obligated to talk to ghosts." He didn't flinch. "Mr. Thompson, we have reason to believe the individual we're tracking is dangerous." "Dangerous," she repeated. "He's a 17-year-old boy who eats pancakes in silence." "That's what he wants you to believe." "I see. Are you harboring him?" She narrowed her eyes. "You got a warrant?" "No." "Then you're trespassing." Behind her, Gus moved into the doorframe, apron still around his neck like a flag. "She asked you to leave," he said, voice flat. The man on the step looked at him, amused. "And you are?" "Vietnam, first Cav, 69. And the guy who will drop your smug ass right here if you take another step." That gave them pause. The second man with the gloves shifted slightly, just a step, barely perceptible, but enough for Ella to notice the bulge under his jacket. Not a badge, not a phone. She knew a concealed sidearm when she saw one. "You came loaded to a diner," she said. The lead man's smile returned. "We prepare for contingencies." "Well, you walked into one," she replied. The man's voice dropped an octave. "If you're hiding him, you're interfering with a federal investigation." Ella took a slow breath. "Ever been to Kandahar?" she asked suddenly. The men blinked. "No," the lead answered. "Then don't talk to me about investigations," she said. "I've seen bodies stacked like wood because someone didn't ask the right questions. I've watched villages burn because someone followed the wrong orders. I know a hunter's stare when I see it, and I know a boy who ain't the one you should be hunting." The silence that followed was thick. Then the second SUV door opened again, and a woman stepped out. Blonde hair, sharp eyes. She looked like she belonged behind a lectern at a press conference, not in a gravel lot in Tennessee. But what chilled Ella was the way she walked. Not rush, not slow, just exact, like a viper coiling into position. She walked right past the men without acknowledgement and stopped 3 feet from the porch. "Ella Mae Thompson," she said. "You've been identified as providing aid to a fugitive asset." Ella looked her dead in the eye. "He's a kid. He's classified." Ella barked a bitter laugh. "He's a person." The woman's jaw twitched. You're interfering with the recovery of government property." That did it. Ella stepped down a stair, boots hitting the gravel with finality. "You listen to me, all of you. I've seen war. I've seen boys barely old enough to shave bleed out in my lap while they cried for their mothers. I stitched them up with my hands shaking and my heart screaming, and I did it because I believed in what we were fighting for. But I didn't do it for a country that calls children property. I didn't serve so you could run black ops in my backyard and hunt kids through diners." The woman's expression shifted. Not fear, not anger, but a flicker of unease. Like something just moved under her skin. Ella leaned closer. "If you come for him again, bring a real warrant. And if you send anyone through my door without one, I promise you, it'll be the last door they walk through." Behind her, Gus cracked his knuckles. The diner's windows reflected the morning sun, bright enough to mask the boy already long gone through the backwoods, the hidden trail, the cover she and Gus spent a year building just in case someone came hunting the wrong soul. The agents didn't move. The woman glanced once at her watch. Then, without a word, she turned. One by one, the black SUVs reversed, pulled out, and disappeared into the haze rising off the highway. Ella didn't watch them go. She just exhaled slowly, turned back to her porch, and whispered to no one in particular, "That line you drew, Caleb. I'm standing on it now." And she stepped back inside, because the war had just come to Tennessee, and Ella Mae Thompson had just picked her side. Caleb didn't run, not in the way people think of running. He moved like he'd done this before. Fast but deliberate, ducking through the side alley behind the diner and slipping through the hedge Ella and Gus had trimmed like clockwork for years. What no one knew, not even the regulars, was that the thick wall of shrubs hid a narrow trail, barely wide enough for one person, that twisted behind the tree line and curved toward the river bluff. He followed it without hesitation. The woods felt like shelter, like breath, like escape. Every step away from the diner was a step further from the people hunting him. But strangely, he didn't feel lighter. He didn't want to leave. Not really. There was something in the way Ella had stood on that porch, the way she'd said, "He's a person." No one had ever said that with that kind of weight in their voice before. He'd been called a lot of things: subject, asset, liability, son of no one, but never a person. He heard the soft crunch of gravel ahead before he saw the clearing. Then came Gus's voice. "You move like a scout," the old man said. He was leaning against an old Ford Bronco that hadn't moved in years. It had vines growing up one wheel, but it didn't matter. They weren't taking the car. "We walk from here," Gus said, motioning behind the tree line. Caleb hesitated. "Where?" "To the cabin. No one will find it, unless they're born here or bleed here." "You bleed here?" Caleb blinked. "Not yet." Gus chuckled. "Then come on. We'll fix that." The trail opened into another stretch of woods, thicker this time, pines instead of oak, the kind of silence that carried weight, the kind that felt like protection. "You knew this might happen," Caleb said as they walked. Gus shrugged. "Ella did. She always plans for the day things break. She doesn't even know who I am. She doesn't care, not in the way they want her to." Caleb let the quiet settle between them again. He'd grown used to silence, but this one felt different. It felt earned. After nearly an hour, they reached the cabin. It wasn't much. Wood beams, tin roof, chimney leaning slightly like it had been tired since '85. But it was clean, safe. Tucked so far off the grid it might as well have been erased from it. There were solar panels on the roof, rain barrels beside the porch, and a well-worn rocking chair by the door. Gus opened it with a key tied around his neck. Inside, the place smelled of cedar and old books. A cot in one corner, a wood stove in the other, a shelf lined with MREs and canned chili. You'll stay here till we figure out what's next, Gus said. Caleb stepped in. She really set all this up? Gus nodded. Ella never said the war ended. She just said it changed uniforms. Back at the diner, Ella was already mopping the floor. The agents hadn't returned. Not yet. But she knew they would. People like that didn't just walk away. So she made a decision. So he called a man she hadn't spoken to in 17 years. Captain Reed Garrison, retired intel officer. Once pulled her out of a field op gone sideways in Helmand. Now he ran a security firm in D.C. that didn't advertise. Ella Mae. His voice rumbled when he picked up. You only call when the sky's on fire. She told him everything. Every word. Every SUV. Every unmarked badge and nameless agency. She even described the woman, blonde, efficient, surgically cold. Reed whistled low. His features were dancing with black-budged ghosts. Then get me a spotlight. You sure? She looked out the diner window, watched a bluebird land on the sign. I'm sure. Reed moved faster than the suits ever did. By nightfall, a black van pulled into the back lot, unmarked but friendlier. 2 techs stepped out, one with a satellite rig, another with a laptop and a data wand. By midnight, the diner had eyes on every angle and enough digital shielding to confuse half the alphabet agencies. Ella didn't ask how he did it. He just brought them coffee. The next morning, the SUVs didn't come back. But something else did. Black sedan, government plates, 1 man inside. He walked into the diner at 7:03, sat at the counter, and ordered coffee. He was older than the others, gray at the temples. Soft leather gloves and a real badge. One with gold trim and a seal she recognized. And Justice Department. Mrs. Thompson, he said, sipping. You caused quite the stir. She didn't answer. Just poured him more coffee. You're protecting a witness. One we didn't even know was still alive. Does he have a name now? She asked. The man smiled faintly. He always did. It was just buried under redactions. He slid a file across the counter. Top cleared. Caleb's real name, birthday, birthplace. No longer a ghost. We want to bring him in, he said. But we'll do it right. Ella narrowed her eyes. He doesn't trust you. He shouldn't. Not yet, but we'd like to fix that. What changed? You did, he said. You pulled him out of the dark. Hard to pretend he doesn't exist when someone's shining a light. That afternoon, Ella drove out to the cabin. Gus was chopping wood like the world still depended on it. Caleb was sitting on the porch reading a book. One she'd left there years ago. The Things They Carried. When she walked up, he looked up and stood, reflexively. You're not in trouble, she said. His shoulders dropped, like a thread snapped loose. They're offering you witness protection. New name, new start. Testify against the people who made you a project instead of a person. He didn't speak. She stepped forward, held out the file. He took it, thumbed through it. His fingers stopped on the last page. A photo. Younger him, smiling. Someone had loved him once. Long before all this. You can stay hidden, she said. Or you can be seen. Caleb looked at her. Which one do you think I should do? She smiled. That quiet, steady Ella smile that never wavered. I think you deserve to be free. A week later, the diner was full again. Regulars returned. Coffee poured. Pancakes flipped. Ella moved through the place like always, a force wrapped in denim and quiet grace. She never told the story, not all of it, but every now and then she'd glance toward the window, toward the booth where a boy once sat silent, and sometimes a postcard would arrive. No return address, just a sketch on the back. The first one was of a bluebird, flying. The second was of a small cabin in the woods. The third, a courtroom bench, empty, until it wasn't. Because Caleb had chosen to testify, His words helped bring down a network no one thought could be touched. People who built a machine out of children's lives. Exposed, dismantled, he had found his voice. And somewhere in a quiet Tennessee diner, an old veteran washed dishes with a small smile on her face. Because, sometimes, slipping a meal to a quiet boy was more than kindness. It was a rescue. It was a revolution. It was the start of everything. And it ended with freedom.